Are you still doing the one thing that's basically guaranteeing she never chases you? Sit with that for a second, because most guys watching this have been doing it for months, maybe longer. And the frustrating part? It feels like the right thing to do. It feels like love. It feels like effort. But from where she's sitting, it lands as something else entirely. Here's the myth everyone believes about getting an avoidant woman to come back after a breakup. If you love her enough, she'll eventually feel safe enough to love you back. If you're patient enough, consistent enough, understanding enough, if you just show her you're not going anywhere, her walls will come down. She'll see how much you care, and she'll chase you. I get why people believe this. It sounds reasonable. It sounds emotionally mature, but I want to show you why it's not just wrong. It's the specific thing keeping her away. And once you actually see how this works underneath, you're going to understand something about avoidant psychology that most people never fully grasp. Let me start with a real example. Picture a guy. Let's call him Marco. He dated a woman for about 14 months. She was warm at the start. She initiated. She was funny and present and seemed genuinely invested. Then around month 4, something shifted. She started pulling back. Marco, being a decent guy, leaned in. He checked in more. He sent thoughtful messages. He made plans to show her she mattered. He was patient when she went distant and understanding when she went cold. She ended it 6 months later, and here's what he told me. I gave her everything. I never pushed. I just showed up consistently. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. He wasn't wrong about what he was doing. He was wrong about what it was communicating. Because here's what was actually happening in her mind every single time Marco showed up with that steady, patient, unwavering pursuit. The primary clinical feature of avoidant attachment is deactivating strategies, automatic internal maneuvers a person uses to suppress attachment needs and maintain emotional distance. And the key word there is automatic. She wasn't making a calculated decision to push him away. Her nervous system was doing it for her. For people with avoidant attachment, emotional closeness activates a quiet sense of threat. Doesn't always register as fear in the obvious sense. More often it shows up as discomfort, restlessness, irritation, or this sudden urge to create space. So every time Marco showed up with more love and more effort, her nervous system read it as more pressure, more threat, more reason to exit. Which is wild when you think about it. The love was real, the effort was real, but the delivery was activating the exact mechanism designed to keep her closed. Here's where the myth becomes dangerous. Most relationship advice tells men to be consistent, stay present, don't abandon ship just because she's pulling back. And that advice isn't entirely wrong, but it's missing something critical. There's a difference between secure presence and anxious pursuit, and an avoidant woman can feel that difference in her nervous system before you've even finished your sentence. Attachment researchers Shaver and Mikulincer found that people deactivate their attachment system when they feel that seeking closeness isn't viable. Now flip that. When the person pursuing her genuinely pulls back, not as a tactic, but because they've refocused on themselves, the deactivation system has nothing left to fire at. The threat signal quiets, and something else starts to emerge. This is the part most people skip over. Avoidant attachers tend to repress their intense emotions after a breakup. This isn't saying they don't feel the pain. They do. They just push down the heartbreak and try to carry on like everything's normal. So in the first weeks after the breakup, she looks fine, she looks free. She might post a few things that make your stomach drop because she seems genuinely unbothered. And here's where the second layer of the myth kicks in. People see this and think she never cared. She's cold. She's moved on. Stop. That conclusion is almost always wrong. Research actually found that avoidance was linked to a bunch of negative reactions to breakups. Greater self-blame, using drugs and alcohol to cope, lower motivation to find someone new, less interest in sex. She's not fine, she's suppressed. And suppression isn't the same as resolution. Recent findings suggest that avoidance, but not anxiety, may actually be associated with greater separation-related distress over the long term. Read that again. Over the long term. So you might be spiraling right now while she seems completely composed. But the delayed reckoning hits avoidant people harder and longer than it hits anxiously attached people. She just doesn't show it. Not yet. Here's what I keep coming back to. The myth says stay consistent and she'll feel safe enough to chase. The truth is almost the exact opposite. The chasing dynamic, you pursuing, her retreating, is actually what's giving her nervous system permission to stay closed. Once distance is created, avoidants often feel a sense of psychological stability returning. Reaching out again risks reopening the emotional intensity they work so hard to regulate. You are the pressure. Your pursuit is basically the permission slip she uses to justify the distance. So long as you're reaching, she gets to keep retreating, and the whole dynamic stays exactly where it is. You outside the wall, her inside it. So what happens when you genuinely stop? I want to be precise here because this is where most advice gets vague and useless. I'm not talking about playing games. I'm not talking about going quiet for 3 days to get her attention and then caving the moment she texts. That's strategic silence. Her nervous system can smell the desperation underneath it. Here's the thing about dismissive avoidant attachment. It describes a pattern where someone learned early that depending on others was unreliable or unsafe. People with this style aren't cold, they're defended. They often come across as independent, low drama, low maintenance, but real emotional closeness consistently triggers withdrawal. Someone defended at that level reads people. She knows when you're pretending to be okay. She knows when the silence is a move. What I'm actually talking about is the moment you genuinely stop making her your project. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally redirected your energy back towards yourself. When you stop monitoring her social media, when you stop analysing her last text, when your days are actually full of things that have nothing to do with her, that's when the dynamic shifts. The rubber band goes slack. For avoidance, pursuit itself feels psychologically risky. Expressing desire, acknowledging loss, reopening emotional closeness can all activate fears of vulnerability and rejection. But when there's no pursuit to respond to, when the familiar reach and retreat dynamic just stops, her nervous system no longer has a threat to deactivate against. And in that stillness, something quiet starts to surface. Here's something interesting. Avoidant attachers may only repress their distress in the direct aftermath of a breakup. Unlike anxiously attached people who brood immediately, avoidants may only start processing after considerable time has passed. So while you were busy trying to heal, she was busy suppressing. And suppression has a shelf life. It runs out. And when it does, the feelings she refused to process come back. All of them. Avoidant attachers also tend to engage in counterfactual thinking after enough time has passed. That if only thinking, where they start wondering what might have been if they'd acted differently. She starts replaying the relationship. Not the hard parts. The parts her deactivation system amplified to justify the distance. She starts replaying the good parts. The safety she felt before things got too intense. The version of you that existed before her nervous system filed you as a threat. If you don't get back together, this can lead to her idealizing the relationship. Attachment researchers Amir Levine and Rachel Heller actually coined the term the Phantom X for this, an avoidant deactivating strategy where they put an X on a pedestal so new potential partners get unfairly compared to an idealized version of you. Keeping everyone else at arm's length, you become basically unreachable in her mind. Not because you were perfect, but because you're gone. Distance made you safe to miss. Now. Here's the uncomfortable part. None of this means she'll reach out. And I know that's not what you want to hear. Avoidants often don't pursue connections that start to feel significant because of fears, of being engulfed. They rarely pursue a relationship after a breakup because of fears of emotional exposure and rejection. Even when the longing is real. Even when she's thinking about you. Even when the grief finally hits her in ways she didn't expect. The absence of pursuit doesn't mean the absence of feeling. It reflects the internal conflict between wanting connection and fearing what closeness actually costs her. She can miss you deeply and still not text. That's not cruelty. That's avoidant attachment doing exactly what it was built to do. So what does this mean practically? The thing you've been told will make her come back. Relentless consistency, patient pursuit, being always available, is actually what confirms her story that closeness equals pressure. And the thing that actually creates movement in an avoidant woman's psychology is the one thing that terrifies you most: letting go, for real, for yourself. Not as a move. Research published in PLOS 1 found that avoidance was linked to lower personal growth through inhibited breakup distress. Avoidant individuals' deactivated distress actually inhibits the cognitive processing a breakup requires. She won't grow from your pursuit. She'll only grow when the familiar push-pull dynamic is gone and she's forced to sit with what she actually feels. And here's the brutal truth nobody wants to say out loud. You can't make that happen. You can't engineer her growth. You can't love her into her own healing. The only person's growth you're responsible for is yours. When you stop chasing and genuinely start rebuilding your own life, when you fill your days with purpose and people and things that actually matter to you, two things become possible that weren't before. One, if she ever does reach out, you'll respond from a grounded place instead of a desperate one. You won't collapse back into the same dynamic because you'll have built something real in the gap. Two, and this is the one that actually changes your life, you'll start to see clearly whether this is someone worth waiting on, or whether the story you've been telling yourself about her potential has been the real trap all along. Because here's what I've noticed studying these dynamics. The men who actually get her back, the ones where she genuinely chases, are never the ones who kept trying. They're the ones who genuinely stopped, who built a life, who stopped outsourcing their worth to whether she texted back, who got to a place where the relationship coming back felt like an option, not a lifeline. That version of you, the one who doesn't need her to choose him to feel whole, is the one she notices, because it's the first version of you that her nervous system doesn't register as a threat, not because you changed who you are, because you stopped abandoning who you are. That's not a manipulation tactic. That's not a trick. That's just the psychology of what actually happens when an avoidant woman's deactivation system finally runs out of something to push against. She gets quiet, and in that quiet, she starts to feel what she spent months suppressing. And for the first time since the relationship ended, you're not the pressure she's escaping. You're the person she lost. What she does with that, that's on her. But where you go from here, fully and completely, that's on you. And that decision, made from a real place instead of a fearful one, is the only move that has ever actually worked.